When a journalist mocked Barron Trump at a charity gala, no one expected his calm response to steal the show. The ballroom at the Fairmont Grand Hotel was nothing short of breathtaking, with crystal chandeliers shimmering above rows of elegantly dressed attendees. The soft hum of conversation added to the grandeur of the evening. In the midst of it all, some of the country's most influential figures, business moguls, actors, journalists, gathered to support a foundation dedicated to helping underprivileged youth. There was a sense of anticipation in the air as the night's keynote speaker prepared to take the stage. Most of the attendees were enjoying themselves, chatting and laughing lightly, while sipping champagne and enjoying the delicate hors d'oeuvres. Yet it was clear that all eyes were on the upcoming speech, the moment everyone was waiting for. The journalist, a celebrated figure in liberal media circles, had been announced weeks earlier as the evening's keynote speaker. Known for their sharp wit and unapologetic opinions, the journalist was both revered by some and criticized by others for their fiery rhetoric. Tonight, however, they promised to deliver an address that would challenge perspectives and ignite thought. But no one could have predicted how dramatically the night would shift. When the journalist took the stage, their confidence was evident. Dressed impeccably in a sleek black suit, they exuded charisma. The audience responded with polite applause, and for a moment, it felt like just another polished, predictable, high-profile event. The journalist began with light-hearted commentary, joking about the city's infamous traffic and sharing a funny anecdote about a past gala mishap involving a toppled champagne tower. Laughter rippled through the crowd, breaking some of the initial tension. But soon, the tone shifted. What started as general commentary on politics and culture took a more pointed turn. The journalist referenced well-known political figures, poking fun at their quirks and missteps. Each jab drew chuckles and nods from parts of the crowd, but some exchanged glances, their smiles tightening. Then the focus landed squarely on Donald Trump. Well, we can't talk about the state of the world without mentioning the man who made orange the new black, the journalist quipped, drawing scattered laughter. Love him or hate him, you have to admit he's the gift that keeps on giving for people like me. The crowd's response was mixed. Some laughed openly, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Barron, sitting quietly at his table, remained still, his expression unreadable. If the journalists noticed his presence, they didn't acknowledge it, at least not yet. The jokes kept coming, each one sharper than the last. The journalist moved on to Trump's policies, his tweets, and even his public appearances. The laughter began to thin out, replaced by a growing sense of unease among the attendees. But the journalist wasn't finished. And of course, they said, pausing for effect, we can't forget his most overlooked legacy, the next generation. I mean, let's talk about Barron. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Heads turned toward Barron, who sat motionless, his face now the center of attention. The journalist's tone remained playful, but the words carried a sting. Imagine growing up in a golden tower, surrounded by marble everything, and your dad tweeting about coffee while the rest of us are just trying to survive Monday mornings. That must have been character building. The attempt at humor fell flat. Some in the crowd chuckled nervously, but most sat in stunned silence. The spotlight of the moment, unasked for and unwelcome, had landed squarely on Barron. But instead of crumbling under the weight of the moment, Barron remained calm, his composure unshaken. What happened next, however, would leave the entire room reeling. The room seemed to hold its breath, all eyes now on Barron Trump, a young man thrust into the spotlight without warning. The journalist's words hung in the air, heavy and cutting, as the crowd waited for his reaction. But Barron didn't flinch. He didn't shift in his chair or glance around nervously. He sat perfectly still, his expression calm but unreadable, his hands resting lightly on the edge of the table. The silence grew louder with each passing second. A few people exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort palpable. Even the journalists seemed to notice the tension, their confident smirk faltering slightly as they glanced toward Barron's table. Perhaps they had expected a laugh, a dismissive shrug, anything but this quiet defiance. Barron's stillness wasn't born of indifference. It was something else entirely. His presence, understated yet commanding, seemed to grow as the moment stretched on. The room, which moments earlier had been buzzing with conversation and laughter, was now unnervingly quiet. It was as if everyone, even those who had chuckled at the jokes, suddenly realized the weight of what had been said. His silence wasn't just a lack of words, it was a statement in itself. It said, "I hear you, I see you, and I am not moved." A murmur broke the silence as someone near the stage whispered to their companion. The journalist cleared their throat, attempting to regain control of the moment. "Tough crowd," they muttered into the microphone, forcing a laugh that no one echoed. The tension in the room was thick, wrapping around everyone like an invisible fog. And then Barron moved slowly, deliberately. He pushed back his chair and stood. The soft scrape of the chair legs against the floor was the only sound in the room. At just over 6 feet tall, he was an imposing figure, his height matched by an aura of unexpected maturity. He looked out at the crowd, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on the journalist. Barron didn't need to speak yet. His presence alone commanded attention, silencing even the faint whispers at the back of the room. He stepped away from his table and walked toward the stage, each step measured, his posture straight and unwavering. The journalist froze, their earlier confidence evaporating as Barron approached. The crowd watched, eyes wide, a mix of anticipation and disbelief. No one knew what he would say or do, but one thing was certain. This young man was about to own the moment. When Barron reached the edge of the stage and finally spoke, his words were nothing anyone had anticipated. "Thank you for your insight," he began, his tone calm but firm. His choice of words caught the journalist and the audience off guard. There was no anger, no trace of indignation, only an eerie sense of control that seemed far beyond his years. "I've grown up watching people make assumptions about me, my family, and my life," Barron continued, his eyes fixed on the journalist. "It's almost become a game to some, a way to fill in the gaps when you don't know the full story. And I get it, we're public figures, it comes with the territory." The room was silent, captivated by the clarity and maturity in his voice. Even those who had quietly laughed at the earlier jokes now sat motionless, their expressions tinged with unease. "But there's something important that often gets overlooked," Barron said, his tone shifting slightly, a subtle intensity building. "Behind every headline, behind every punchline, there's a human being, someone with their own struggles, their own dreams, and their own story. You may think you know me because of who my father is, but you don't. Not really." The journalist, who had been gripping the edge of the podium, now seemed visibly uncomfortable. Barron's words weren't an attack, they were a mirror reflecting back the weight of what had just occurred. "What I've learned," Barron said, pausing for a moment, "is that respect doesn't have to be earned. It should be given freely, especially when you don't know someone's story." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd, but Barron wasn't finished. He turned slightly, addressing the audience now. As much as the journalist, we live in a time where it's easy to tear each other down, he said, his voice steady but filled with quiet conviction. Words have power. They can hurt or they can heal. They can divide or they can unite. And I think we could all use a little more of the latter. The audience was spellbound. Barron's words, spoken with a calm resolve, carried a weight that seemed to transcend his age. It was clear that he wasn't just responding to a moment. He was speaking to something much larger, something universal. Barron took a step back, his gaze once again locking with the journalist. "I hope this gives you something to think about," he said softly. There was no malice in his voice, only a quiet strength that left the room in awe. He turned and began walking back to his seat, the soft clicks of his shoes on the polished floor, the only sound in the stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the journalists stood frozen, their earlier bravado completely dissolved. But as Barron sat down and the applause began to build, the real impact of his words would echo far beyond that room. The applause started as a hesitant clap from somewhere near the front, but it grew quickly, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Within moments, the entire ballroom was on its feet, erupting into a thunderous standing ovation. Some clapped with admiration, others with a sense of redemption for the awkwardness that had hung in the air just minutes earlier. The journalist, still standing at the podium, attempted to muster a smile, but it was clear the moment no longer belonged to them. Barron, seated back at his table, didn't react to the applause. He remained composed, offering only a polite nod to the attendees around him. It wasn't humility or shyness. It was the quiet assurance of someone who had said exactly what needed to be said. Within hours, snippets of the moment began flooding social media. Attendees had discreetly recorded Barron's speech on their phones, and the footage spread like wildfire. Tweets, Instagram stories, and TikTok clips captured the essence of the evening, with captions ranging from admiration for Barron's composure to critiques of the journalist's misplaced humor. Barron Trump just schooled an entire room on class and respect, read one viral tweet. Another post, shared by a prominent celebrity in attendance, stated, "No matter what you think of his family, this young man just gave us all something to think about." News outlets picked up the story the next morning. Some praised Barron for his maturity, calling it a defining moment for someone who had spent much of his life in the shadow of public scrutiny. Others debated the ethics of the journalist's remarks, questioning whether public figures, especially young ones, should ever be fair game for such commentary. The journalist, for their part, issued a statement the following day. "Comedy and commentary are powerful tools, but they must be wielded responsibly. Last night, I crossed a line, and I apologize to Barron Trump for my remarks." But not everyone accepted the apology at face value. Talk shows, podcasts, and online forums buzzed with heated debates about the incident. Some argued that Barron's speech was a much-needed call,